Hello and welcome into a new episode of Capital View, a production of the Daily Journal and djournal.com, coming at you every Monday afternoon around 2 o'clock. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Brad Locke, joined down in Jackson by Capitol Bureau Chief Bobby Harrison. And if you miss any of this or you just want to go back and rewatch it, we'll have this up at djournal.com for a while. So we'll spend a few minutes talking about what's going on in the state capitol. So, Bobby, how you doing on this Monday?
All right, Brad, we're just about right at 2 o'clock today. This is about as good as we do. Good as it gets for us to be on time.
Well, knock on wood, Bobby,
Yeah,
that nothing technical goes wrong. So we got a couple of things we want to talk about today, Bob. We've got, of course, these study groups that House Speaker Philip Gunn has proposed to kind of take a closer look and make suggestions, perhaps, regarding Mississippi's taxing and spending practices. Of course, the state budget has been a big news item lately, with having to dip into the rainy day fund just to make budget this fiscal year. Now, the new fiscal year started. A lot of the concern, especially from Democrats, about making that budget work, Bobby. So first, the story we want to talk about, you wrote yesterday about how it might help the infrastructure program, fixing roads and bridges. But first, just for people maybe not familiar, what exactly are these groups going to be doing? When might they start convening?
Well, I'm not sure about that. Well, I'll take that back. One of the groups is supposed to convene early in August. That's the tax group. But the Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves and Governor Phil Bryant held a joint press conference last week to announce these working groups to look at spending and taxation policies in the state. And if you recall, back in April when the session ended, the Speaker said at that time, within 2 weeks, they were going to make an announcement on forming these working groups. And here it is, middle of July, and they finally made the announcement of whether they can get stuff done for the 2017 session. The time is getting short now. But these groups, there's a group that will look at the state's tax policy, tax structure, and perhaps suggest changes to that. Then there's groups that look at education, public health, law enforcement, just a whole litany of different aspects of state government, and directly make some suggestions in those areas. Now, some people would argue that that's kind of what there's already committees set up to have oversight in all these areas, and some people might argue that that's the job of the legislative committees to do that. And the committees haven't been meeting much this summer, if any, which is kind of unusual. But so I guess some of the work that the committees normally do is going to be done by these working groups, and this time around.
Well, and as far as how it relates to the infrastructure needs of the state, of course, you remember this past session you had the Mississippi Economic Council proposing the Accelerate Mississippi program. They wanted an extra $375 million per year to help improve and maintain several miles of road. In fact, I think in your story, the figure, Bobby, is 20,000 miles of highway in very poor condition and more than 1,000 deficient bridges. And, that's, as someone noted in the story, improving these roads and bridges are not only providing economic benefit, but a safety benefit. Obviously, we don't want big trucks or just regular cars driving over substandard roadways that could, bridges could collapse and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's a lot of people think this. That's where these working groups could have their biggest impact is in this area, not only in transportation, but the issue with the roads and bridges is there's just not enough money in the Department of Transportation budget right now to highways. And this past session, various groups was pushing tax increases to put this program in place, $375 million a year, as you mentioned. And there just wasn't a appetite in the legislature for doing that. Now, the interesting thing is that the House Transportation Committee Chair, Charles Busby, a conservative Republican from the Gulf Coast, and Trey Lamar, Vice Chair of Ways and Means in the House, he's a Republican from this Tate County up in North Mississippi. They had a plan that they were going to unveil to provide more money for roads and bridges through probably, I'm guessing, primarily the money was going to come through a gasoline increase in the gasoline tax.
Right.
But as part of that program, they were also going to make, there wasn't bail, so it was never officially announced. So you just got sort of bits and pieces here and there, but they were going to suggest some pretty dramatic changes in the state's tax structure. One of the changes that was proposed was increasing this sales tax from 7% to 9% on most retail items, but at the same time, reducing or eliminating the tax on groceries, which is also at 7%. You know, tax on groceries in Mississippi is one of the highest, if not the highest in the nation. And there's been talk through the years that, for the poor state of the nation to be charging the highest tax on groceries, it kind of seems unfair. But and so that was allegedly part of their program, but they never unveiled it because it just wasn't an appetite for from the majority in the House or the Senate to increase taxes on gasoline at this point in time. Now, there's some thought that through these working groups that they might be able to finagle something through the process to get more money for roads and bridges, and also perhaps do some pretty dramatic changes to the tax structure. Now, of course, this is all kind of unusual that they're talking about doing these changes to the tax structure a year after they passed what would be the largest tax cut in the state's history, and that was a tax cut for businesses and on personal income. So, but now that there's some thought that road and bridge tax could be come out of this working group process.
And the next legislative session, I guess, less than 6 months away now. I guess the thought is, they want to try to get these working groups going and getting some ideas and whatnot, but how easy is it going to be to get that done in time for the next session? I mean, how long could it take before we see any results from this as far as the infrastructure? The
speaker said that he would like to see a lot of these suggestions enacted during the 2017 session, but he specifically said that when it comes to taxes, it may take more than a year to sort through and make recommendations. So I could see that happening actually in the 2018 session instead of the 2017 session.
All right, let's switch gears a little bit here, Bobby. Let's talk about Attorney General Jim Hood and the controversial House Bill 1523. Of course, that's known by many names, the Religious Freedom Bill, known by that to some, but a lot of opposition to it. And that bill was recently overturned by a U.S. District Judge down in the Southern District of Mississippi. And after that, Jim Hood last Wednesday said, you know what, I'm done defending this law. And I don't know that means the issue's dead, Bobby, by any means. But as far as he's concerned, it's basically, I guess it got too expensive and too time consuming, didn't it?
Yeah, he said it was. I did a story a couple weeks ago. I think I believe his office spent more than 400 hours in defense of that particular bill. And Judge Carlton Reeves, as you said, overturned it, struck the whole thing down. Now the governor is going to continue to try to defend it and get Reeves' decision appealed, and he hopes to get it overturned in a higher court. And he says he's going to get some national attorneys who do this who specialize in these kind of cases to handle the case for the state on for free. So he said it won't cost the state any money to continue to appeal. Hood made the point that he was, his office, it was affecting his office's ability to defend other legislation passed, particularly in the 2016 session by the legislature. Some of those bills deal with abortion, effort to take over the state, to take over, in a sense, take over the Jackson Municipal Airport. Yeah. And several other bills that are getting tied up in court, including the charter school legislation. There's a group, saying that the charter school legislation is unconstitutional. So there's a lot of big cases involving legislation that his office is working on. Now, he also, Brad, I think this is important. He makes the point that the bill is not needed in some aspects that his supporters have claimed it is needed.
Right.
He makes the point that the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution gives any religious group, minister or church, the right not to marry anybody they don't want to marry, including not to provide a service to marry anybody they don't want to provide that service to, including same-sex couples. And he says there's no law dealing with, in Mississippi requiring a cake maker, for instance, to provide a service to a same-sex couple. There's laws in other states that require them to do that, but not in Mississippi. So he says the law is not nearly as it's not needed nearly as much as the supporters claim it's needed. Now the area where the law it does have an impact and is the most controversial, and the part that Reeves actually overturned first was the part requiring allowing a circuit clerk not to provide a marriage license to a same-sex couple.
Right.
That part was overturned, and Hood said that when you're a public servant, you have to follow the laws of the state and the nation, whether you want to or not. And so that's the main part of the law that would have an impact, a real world impact, and that part might be harder to defend in a higher court, especially since the U.S. Supreme Court has already addressed that issue in the Kentucky case, where a Kentucky clerk was trying not to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples.
Yeah, and Hood was pretty critical too, just of critical of the existence of this bill, because he talked about how it's done nothing but tarnish the state's image, and he says, we got all these other things that we need to worry about as far as, we can't fully fund public education, the roads and bridges we mentioned earlier here in the program, all that sort of stuff. He feels like, I guess, the focus is in the wrong place with this. Yeah, and if you recall, a lot of significant groups came out against this bill when it was working its way through the legislative process, including Nissan, which has a big plant down here in central Mississippi, and Toyota, which has, of course, the plant there at Blue Springs near Tupelo. Both of those companies came out against the bill, as well as the Mississippi Economic Council and some other significant business groups. So we'll see what happens as it works its way through the court. I assume that ultimately it would go to the Supreme Court if Brian is successful on his appeals in the lower courts. All right. Well, that's it for today's episode. Thanks to Bobby for joining us and enlightening us on the issues going on down there in Jackson. Again, we come to you each Monday here at djournal.com with Capital View. And if you miss it, just want to watch the replay, we'll have it right here at djournal.com. Give Bobby a follow on Twitter at BobbyHarrison9. You can follow me on Twitter as well if you wish, at Brad Locke. And we'll be back next week. So until then, have a good week. Thanks, Bobby. Thanks, Brad. All right.